Hello, welcome to today's class. This is paired passages, one of the question types for the SAT test. Now, I'd like to say at the beginning that if you do not practice these strategies, it may be difficult to use them during the test. So don't just learn them theoretically, practice them when you're using the Blue Book app, software rather, as well as when I give you assignments. Now, applying them may seem stressful at first because it's new to you. But the truth is, if you apply them over and over again, you become used to them and you notice a lot of improvement. So it may be difficult applying them at first, but please stick to the plan. All right, so in this class, you'll learn to distinguish subtle differences in perspective and not just obvious agreement or disagreement. What that means is there are times when the difference between two passages goes beyond just whether or not they agree. Uh, Also, you would analyze how each author builds an argument, where the logic converges or diverges. What that means is authors argue differently and they use different approaches when they argue. So you want to learn the different approaches to how authors argue and um, use that when answering questions. Number three, you want to evaluate tone shifts and rhetorical strategies, especially when authors seem to agree but actually emphasize different priorities. So basically, two paragraphs may say the same thing, but may differ in terms of tone. And the difference in tone may be a significant aspect that will help you answer the questions. Number four, you should be able to anticipate cross passage questions where the text asks you to put authors in dialogue. For instance, if we hear a question that tells you, what would the author of passage B likely say to the author of passage A? For you to be able to answer that kind of question, you must understand both passages and assume the role of both authors. Number five, you must be able to synthesize efficiently under time pressure. Well, what that means is you'll be timed and you don't want to, because of pressure, pick the wrong answers. So let's begin. Contrasting perspectives beyond agree and disagree. Now, at the advanced level, the real challenge is recognizing that authors rarely completely agree or completely disagree. What that means is you may read a paragraph where the authors agree on the subject, or where both of them disagree. Also, you could read a paragraph where what matters is not whether or not they agree. What matters is can you see the subtle things beneath the lines, or between the lines rather. For instance, author A and B may share a common concern. For instance, they both agree that noise pollution is a problem. Let's say they both agree that noise pollution is a problem. Now, from the superficial perspective, you may say, oh, both paragraphs agree. But there are times when there are subtle differences, not obvious ones. They may agree on the main point, but there are times where there are different differences, such as the solutions. Author A may say that, you know what, yes, yes, noise pollution is a thing, but we need to make noise pollution a criminal offense. If you make a certain level of noise, you should be arrested. That's author A's solution. Author B may say, while noise pollution is a major problem, making it a criminal offense is not the next step of action. Rather, we should educate people on how to avoid noise pollution. So both of them agree that noise pollution is a problem, but they disagree on the solutions. So in this case, both passages only differ on the supporting detail, not on the main idea. Now, what you want to do is at times they acknowledge a shared fact, but assign it different importance. What that means is at times they both agree that something is the case, but they give different level of importance to it in the sense that, for instance, author A may say that there is a high level of corruption in Nigeria, and that's why Nigerians are struggling with maybe progress. Author B may say, yes, there is a high level of corruption in Nigeria, but that's not why Nigerians are struggling. So you see, both of them agree that there is a high level of corruption, but they place different importance on it. One says that's why Nigerians are struggling, the other says, no, that's not why Nigerians are struggling. So you see, in both cases, we have two people who agree on the particular thing, but they disagree on the importance of that thing or the role of that thing. All right. The next one says you may see two paragraphs that critique the same phenomenon but from different angles, maybe ethical, scientific, or historical. For instance, two people may critique dress styles. The first paragraph may critique it from the aspect of culture. Another may critique from the perspective of religion. What does that tell us? It tells us that we may agree that something should be critiqued, but we may look at it from different perspectives. This occurs a lot in debates where somebody agrees with you on something, but their reason for disagreeing or their reason for agreeing with you on that thing may not be the same as your reason. For instance, you may say, I don't like that person. And that person says, oh, I don't like that person as well. And then the person says, I don't like the way he chews loudly. And then you say, oh, I actually don't like him because he's rude. So you see, you both do not like someone, but your reasons differ or your perspectives differ. So let's proceed. Look at this example. Passage 1. An economist argues that universal basic income will reduce poverty by guaranteeing financial security. So, firstly, let us break down the sentence. We have an economist who is speaking, is talking about, or they are talking about universal basic income, and they claim that it will reduce poverty and guarantee financial security. Now, passage 2 says a sociologist agrees. So we have a different person speaking, a sociologist. They agree that UBI reduces poverty. So, yes, they agree that it reduces poverty, which is what passage A says. However, they have a different perspective or value, but argue it risks weakening motivation to work. So, while they agree on the same thing, you can also see as well that passage 2 places a different as there's a subtle disagreement. They agree, but there's a subtle disagreement, which is the um, angle from which they look at it. One sees it as a solution. Excuse me. One sees it as a solution, the other sees it as um, a solution with a clause, with a clause attached to it. So it is superficially they both acknowledge poverty reduction, but at a deeper level, their value judgments differ. So the importance is what differs. The economist emphasizes security, the sociologist emphasizes work ethic. Now, here what we did is we distinguish not just what, but the why or the so what. That is, yes, they both think UBI helps poverty, which is universal basic income. But their priorities diverge. One is concerned with the reduction of poverty, one is concerned with work ethic. All right. Now, the next thing we'll talk about is tracking nuances of agreement and disagreement. SAT questions often phrase things subtly, very subtly. The authors would most likely agree that. So, you see, emphasis on the word most, or most, the phrase most likely, which could imply that they may agree on a number of things, but there is one thing they most likely would agree on. Most likely, emphasis on most likely, which means um, the highest form of agreement will come from something. Look at another way the question could be framed. Which claim from passage 1 would the author of passage 2 most directly challenge? Which would imply that, yes, they may disagree on certain things, but there is one the author most likely will challenge. Now, how do you answer these types of questions? How do you track nuances of agreement and disagreement? How do you track nuances of agreement and disagreement? Now, the first thing you want to do, by the way, nuances just means a minor distinction, like nuances, minor distinction. So, how can you track minor distinctions? Okay. For instance, if I say to you, I like swimming a lot, but my favorite hobby is playing football. So, if I ask you, what does Mr. Phillips love the most? Yes, he likes swimming a lot, but his favorite hobby is playing football. So, what does he like the most would be playing football because that's his favorite hobby. Which favorite would mean best amongst the rest. So, even if he likes to swim a lot, not as much as he likes to play football. So, those little distinctions matter. So, strategy mark points of overlap. Points of overlap mean where the two passages agree or where they meet the convergence point. So what that means is what fact, observation, or principle do they both accept? Do they agree on a fact? Do they agree on an observation? Do they agree on a principle? Now, when you've marked the points of overlap, you also want to mark the points of divergence. Remember, emphasis on the plurality points, which means paragraphs could agree on more than one thing and they could disagree on more than one thing. So, by points of divergence, I mean what do they interpret differently or prioritize differently? All right, let's move on. Look at this example. Passage 1 argues that social media is damaging because it increases anxiety. By the way, this is not how the passage will look like in the exam. During the test, obviously, it's an actual paragraph. I'm only using the main ideas. I'm only using the main ideas discussed because we've discussed main ideas earlier. The first thing you want to do when you see a paragraph, obviously, is to identify the main idea, isn't it? And we treated that in the previous class. So these are just main ideas. Passage 1 argues that social media is damaging because it increases anxiety. So social media is damaging is the main point, and the reason is that it increases anxiety. So passage 2 says social media is damaging. So which is they both this is the point of of convergence, not divergence, convergence. Here they overlap. They both agree it is damaging. Now this passage 2 says it spreads misinformation. Now, so you can see there's a subtle difference here. They may agree that social media is damaging, but they disagree, or they differ in their reasons. One deals with mental health, isn't it? The other deals with um, false news. So while they agree on the fact that social media is damaging, they agree on they disagree on the reasons. So agreement: social media has negative effects. Divergence: one stresses psychological health, the other truth, information, integrity. So psychological health, which is what I call mental health here, and the other truth, information, integrity, which I call false news. So on the SAT, a tricky agreement question would give an answer like both passages suggest social media has harmful consequences. That's correct. Now look at this option. Both claim it causes anxiety. This is wrong because only one paragraph claims that it causes anxiety, which is paragraph 1. But the answer would be both passages suggest social media has harmful consequences. This is where they overlap. Of course, that depends on what the question is. All right. Next one, analyzing argument structure across passages. Each author uses evidence and reasoning differently. It's just the same as when you are arguing in person or you are in a debate. People argue differently. Some people argue with emotions to try to convince you to agree with them. For instance, please help me. I have a baby at home, but please don't kill me. I have a child. Trying to appeal to their more humane side. And some people argue with logic, and this is one thing people have accused men of doing. They say in all situations they are too logical. So you're like, I can't do this because of this. So you have a logical argument. So the same applies to SAT passages. They use evidence differently and reasoning differently. Some of them appeal to data, which means numbers. In passages like this, you see a lot of statistics, reference to experiments, reference to studies. You see things like according to social study, according to social research, in 1920, 20%, 20% of so and so. Okay, let's go on. Where was I? So now also some passages appeal to principle, ethics, that is to morality. This deals more with morality. For instance, is it fair? Is it just? Is it responsible? This one appeals to your religious side. Some appeal to precedent. Precedent just means the past. So some appeal to past, like, oh, this is not how we used to do it, or this was how it was done in the past, so we should stick to it. Okay? So knowing this helps you understand paragraphs more. How authors present their arguments. How do they argue? what is their evidence, what is their reasoning, and how does it differ. Now, the reason this is important is because you may see a question that tells you to differentiate between the evidence provided in passage A from passage B, or the reasoning in passage A and passage B. Look at this. Historian says voting rights expanded through grassroots activism. So we have a historian, and what it says that voting rights expanded through grassroots activism. A legal scholar says voting rights expanded primarily through the Supreme Court rulings. So they both agree that voting rights expanded, but they claim different things. One claims it is through grassroots activism, the other claims it is through Supreme Court rulings. So that's difference in evidence. So both of them agree voting rights expanded, but part one uses social evidence. So he's saying the reason is voting rights expanded was because of the activism. Maybe activism just here means things like protests. Protests like the NSAS protest. Part two uses legal evidence. So he's saying, yeah, it is the courts that ruled in favor of, and even for the courts, maybe the protest would have been considered illegal. So the same claim that voting rights expanded, but different evidence. So the question could be, which choice best describes a difference in the author's use of evidence? Which choice best describes a difference in the author's, by the way, this is plural possessive noun. If it was singular, it would be authors. I'm explaining this because it definitely you may come across something like this in the grammatical aspect of the SAT test. So let's move on. So which choice best describes a difference in the author's use of evidence? So in this case, there are two authors, hence the apostrophe coming after the S. Now, correct answer, passage 1 relies on social activism examples. So passage 1 relies on social activism examples. Passage 2 relies on judicial precedent. Judicial precedent just means legal evidence. Now, the next thing we'll talk about is the tone and subtle attitude shifts. When you read a text or two texts, they may differ in tone. Remember, we said tone means the attitude of the author towards the text or towards the subject. The attitude towards the subject, the attitude of the author. Remember, not your own attitude, the attitude of the writer. So when you read the paragraph, at times what differs is the tone. Look at this. Renewable energy is a realistic alternative, though we must carefully scale its use. So you see here, there is skepticism. Renewable energy is a realistic alternative, which is the person saying yes, it's a good alternative. Though we must, the though here suggests skepticism. Skepticism means uncertainty or caution. Let's use the word caution. Skepticism means caution, like being careful. Though we must carefully scale its use. Look at passage 2. Renewable energy, while promising, is being irresponsibly promoted as a cure-all. So it looks as if they're saying the same thing, because you see while promising here, but it says it's being irresponsibly promoted as a cure-all. This one is also skeptical, but it's more aggressive with the skepticism. It's saying, it's accusing some people of doing something, saying you people are making it seem as if it's like during the elections. Some were saying, yes, Obi may be an alternative, but stop making him look like the Messiah. So this is similar to this situation. One is skeptical, one is not One is saying, hey, let's exercise caution. One is saying, you people are making it seem as if it's the cure. So both of them acknowledge that yes, renewable energy is promising because they both say it is promising in a sense. One says it's a realistic alternative. One says it's promising. Promising means it could yield results. Now, but there's a difference in tone. One is saying let us exercise caution. One is being accusatory. So there's a difference between both skepticism. One is just careful, a lighter form of skepticism. The other is more aggressive. The other one is more aggressive. So let's move on. On the SAT, you might see how does passage 2 tone towards um, renewable energy. It should be toward, right? How does passage 2 tone towards renewable energy compare with passage 1's? Passage 1 is cautiously optimistic. Passage 2 is critical, that is, it is criticizing. So what you want to do here is detect emotional shading, like when something is cautious, when it is skeptical, when somebody has resigned, when someone's enthusiastic. You should be able to notice the tone, not just if it is positive or negative. You should be able to notice tone beyond positive or negative. All right. Author in dialogue questions. One of the hardest SAT paired passage question types asks you to predict how author A would respond to author B's claim. That is, how would author A like to respond to author B? So this is this is testing your ability to make deductions and calculated assumptions. That is based on the evidence you have. Based on the evidence you have, can you make a calculated guess? Let's put that into. Let's see an example to make that clearer. The question says, which statement from passage 2 would author 1 most likely disagree with? This is the kind of question you would encounter. Which statement from passage 2 would author 1 most likely disagree with? So which means you're going to get the main idea in passage 1 and then look for a statement in passage 2 that contradicts it. So what you want to do is identify the author 1's core stance, which is what I just called main idea. Then match it against specific claims in passage 2. Then when you match it with specific claims in passage 2, you let's say there are 5 claims in passage 2. You check it, you match the claim in passage 1 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you identify which of them most likely disagrees with it. So you eliminate choices that sound close but misrepresent the nuance. All right. So when you're practicing, and you do what I've been doing. Break down. Don't write full gist. Just break down. Focus on the paragraphs. Let's assume you have 2 paragraphs now. This is what you want to do. Focus on these 5 things for each paragraph. For paragraph 1, identify the main idea. Write it out in your jotter. Identify the evidence, the key evidence for that main idea. Write it out in your jotter. Identify the tone of the passage. Write it out. Identify how passage. Now, when you do the same thing for passage 2, main idea, evidence, tone, then identify how both paragraphs overlap. How they overlap. Then you identify how they disagree. If you can do this for both paragraphs, you can answer any question. Because now you have gotten the five key parts: the main idea, the evidence, the tone, the overlap, and where they disagree. This quick chat, which you can do in say 30 seconds or one, let's assume because you're just doing it for the first time, 1 minute, makes cross passage questions easier. Whenever you hear cross passage question, just know you're referring to questions on paired passages. Let's take a look at some questions. Passage 1 and 2. Space exploration should be prioritized because it inspires innovation. Historically, the Apollo missions spurred technologies we use today, from telecommunications to material science. Critics argue that cost is too high, but the return on knowledge and innovation outweighs it. Now, while space exploration has yielded benefits, framing it as a necessity is misleading. So, we have where they differ already. The resources poured into rockets could address urgent problems like poverty and crime. So we have the main idea from wild to misleading. We have the evidence. The resources poured into rockets could address urgent problems like poverty and crime. Then the overlap is that they both agree that its use benefits. The tone for the first one is one of optimism. The tone for the second one is one of is a critical one, as well as disapproving. And they both disagree. One says it is the cost is too high, but the return on knowledge and innovation outweighs it. So one says yes, it is expensive, but it is the benefit is more. The other one says it is too expensive, or the resources is being misused. It should be used for more urgent problems. I feel like I agree more with passage two, but my opinion is not the general consensus, not necessarily. So investment should focus on immediate human needs rather than speculative cosmic ventures. Now let's analyze. Passage 1 supports space exploration, emphasizes innovation. Passage 2 is skeptical and prioritizes earthly issues. They both agree that space exploration has yielded benefits. They disagree. One says that space exploration is a priority, the other says it is a misplaced priority. So the tone, one is enthusiastic, defensive, one is pragmatic and critical. All right, let's answer some questions. The answers have been ticked already, and you have your own classwork. Now, questions. This is questions for what we just read. Let's read it again. Space exploration should be prioritized because it inspires innovation. Historically, the Apollo missions spurred technologies we use today, um, from telecommunications to material science. Critics argue that the cost is too high, but the return on knowledge and innovation outweighs it. Now, passage 2, while space exploration has yielded benefits, framing it as a necessity is misleading. The resources poured into rockets could address urgent problems like poverty and climate change. Investment should focus on immediate human needs rather than speculative cosmic ventures. Now, you could pause the video here to read it yourself, just in case while I was reading it, you were a bit confused. So you could pause it here, read yourself, and then you can play as soon as you're done reading. Now, we've analyzed it already, so let's answer the questions. The author of passage 1 would most likely respond to passage two's claim about urgent problems by. So you see, they're saying how would author 1 respond to passage 2? No, passage 2 said the resources should be spent on more urgent problems. So how do you think the passage 1's author would respond? A. Acknowledging these problems but insisting space exploration indirectly helps solve them. Agreeing entirely and rejecting space exploration. arguing that space separation causes poverty, ignoring the claim. I don't think it will ignore the claim, obviously. B and C are obviously wrong, so A is the answer. Why? Because, yes, the person is not oblivious to the fact that there are problems in the world, but they are claiming that um, going to space helps to solve this problem. It says critics argue that the cost is too high, but the return on knowledge and innovation outweighs it. So, return on knowledge. So, it claims we're getting knowledge and innovation that will benefit all of mankind. Number two, which choice best captures the difference in evidence? Evidence. Remember, we treated evidence. We treated evidence and we said, where is it? Uh, we said that there is one that appeals to data, there's one that appeals to principal ethics, and there's one that appeals to precedent history. We discussed evidence in the previous class as well, so use that knowledge to here. Passage 1 cites historical technology advances. Passage 2 cites present social needs. Passage 1 relies on statistics. Are there statistics? Is there statistics there? I don't think so. Nope. Passage 2 relies on anecdotes. I don't think there are anecdotes. Anecdotes simply refer to stories, and I don't think uh, anecdotes are personal stories or personal experiences. Passage C, passage 1 is based on emotion, passage 2 is based on science. That's not the case. D, both passages rely solely on speculative claims. Are they speculative? No, they're not speculative. So passage 1 is correct. One is saying yes, there will be technological advancements. One is saying we need to focus on social needs, urgent needs. Number 3, the authors would most likely agree on which point? The authors would most likely agree on which point? A, space exploration has no value. That's not the case. C, space exploration should be the top global priority. Passage 1 agrees, passage 2 does not even agree. I don't think passage 1 says that either. D, poverty is less important than exploration. They won't agree on this, obviously. Passage 2 thinks so. Passage 1 doesn't. Now, space exploration has produced benefits in the past. They can both agree on this. So, this is the answer. Now, 4. Which answer best describes the tone from passage 2? A, celebratory. No, it's not celebratory. Indifferent. It's not indifferent. It's not enthusiastic either. It is skeptical, but pragmatic. Skeptical means it is cautious. Pragmatic means practical or realistic. All right. Common pitfalls to avoid. Don't assume complete disagreement. At times, they agree, but they agree in a subtle way. There are times when they obviously disagree at the surface level, but they also have subtle aspects in which they agree. Like the one we just read. They disagree on which is more important, but there's a subtle agreement that yes, space exploration actually has benefits. Number 2, don't overread the tone. Don't label every cautious passage as hostile. Being cautious does not mean you're hostile. Like the example we saw, where one person was cautious about something being a solution, and the other one was more aggressive. So they were both cautious, but one was more hostile than the other. Number 3, don't forget the scope. An author may critique one aspect of a claim, not the entire idea. Number 4, confusing evidence with conclusion. One author may use the same evidence but argue for a different outcome. So it's possible both of them use the same evidence but have different claims in general. So you have a classwork to do. I'm sending you 2 questions, classwork and assignment. This should be done in class normally, but um, you did this one you do it as an assignment as well. So this is the classwork. You have 15 questions in total. Yeah, that's it. So I'll send you assignment as well. I'll send you this video. So you have to submit 2 answers, one to the classwork, one to the assignment. So watch the video as many times as you want. I hope you understood the class and you will give me feedback at the end. All right. Thank you. See you in the next video.